Okay, so for this particular assignment, you're going to need to approach this very differently than you would in Photoshop. And to be really honest with you, it is totally different, the end product. It may look similar, but functionally and in terms of editing quality, it's not as good. So this would definitely be one of those instances when hands down Photoshop and probably GIMP are going to do this better than Pixlr. There's a lot of things it does do well. Masks are not perhaps its strongest suit, but we're going to give it a shot. All right, so for the first assignment, you will need to download the Caprisun graphic, and mine is apparently frozen into a block of plastic. Let's see what's going on here. You'll need to download the Caprisun graphic, and you will also need a splat of some kind. The Photoshop instructions tell you to go get splatter brushes. That's not what you guys need. You're going to need an actual splat. So if you type in, ink splat or something like that, you will end up with a lot of web options. You could do a screen capture if you can't do anything else. And just grab an image. It needs to be of reasonably decent quality, sort of large enough that it would work layered over the girl graphic, which is what you're going to layer over. So if you were doing it from something like this, you could go here and you could do a screen capture using either the snipping tool or the Command Shift 4 if you're on a Mac, and just make sure you end up with a splat that you can work from. The color of the splat doesn't really matter. You just need that particular graphic. So I've got a splat and I've got my girl image, and I'm ready to go ahead and start in here. I'm going to click on Open Image, and I'm in Pixlr, by the way, already. This is the way your page is going to come up initially. You're going to click on Advanced E. It is a more feature-heavy editor, even if it is more limited than Photoshop. All right, we're going to click on Open Image once you've done that, and you'll browse to wherever it is you downloaded your graphics to. The Caprisun Girl is the first one, and then later on I'm going to download the splat as well. Now, one thing that's different certainly than Photoshop is it's asking us before we ever really get into the file what size we want to work with. This is because it's a cloud-based product. They're very concerned with size. The original graphic was pretty big. The instructions have us going down in size. So we're going to pick web, which is max to 1280 pixels, and that will work. We could type in a size here as well. So 1280 being the largest. The instructions tell us a 640 by 480. If we type in 640, it tells us 640 by 702. And that's because this graphic is taller than the 480. So 640 by 702 is fine because I don't necessarily want the cropping yet, so that'll work. And it brings it in at that size, so we do not have to do the scaling that otherwise would have been necessary. We don't need the full height, but having it is not a huge problem here. All right, so once we get the graphic open, we have several things that we need to do. The first of these is that we need to unlock this guy so that we can edit it, move it around, make those kind of changes. It needs to be able to support transparency. So I double-clicked on the little lock icon, and now mine, in terms of the history, says layer unlock, and that's good. That's what I wanted. I'm going to need an additional layer that I'm going to put behind this, which will be my background. And so I'm going to go up to my layer menu at the top, and I'm going to choose New Layer. And this one is going to be my background, so I'm going to drag it below. And then the last thing I need is going to be that splatter that I did a screen capture, downloaded, whatever. And what's kind of nice, and this is actually one feature I do like, under the layer menu, we have an option for image as layer. In Photoshop, you typically open graphics and then you have to move the content into a single combined file. The image as layer keeps us from having to do that. So we pick that option. I'm going to go to my splat, which mine's a screenshot, and then I'm going to click on Open, and it will come in here as part of this file without my having to do anything else special, so that's really helpful. A couple more things, and then I am ready to move on to how we're actually pulling all this together. The little check marks that show up to the right hand side of the individual layers are the layer visibility items, and that's the way we're going to turn layers on and off when we don't need them. I don't need my splat, I don't need my Caprisun girl right now. I just need layer 2 to be the active one, so I've unchecked the boxes to the right of those two guys. And I'm now on my new layer 2. For this one, I'm going to need ultimately a gradient, but I'm going to start with a solid color fill. The sample image showed peach. Don't want peach for mine. I'm going to pick a green color as my jumping off point, and anything's fine. I mean, it's up to you what you choose for this one, but pick a color that you like. There is a little paint bucket, which sort of looks like a sideways, I mean, it looks like a diamond that's dark at the top and light at the bottom with a drop coming off of it. That is the paint bucket, and that's what you're going to use to fill. I'm going to click in my large open background area. It'll fill the whole area with that green, and now I'm part of the way where I want to go. The next thing I want to do after I get my fill in there is I want to grab the gradient tool, and I want to do a gradient that darkens the corners. I don't want the middle color to change. So I'm going to have to make a couple of changes to the gradient to accomplish that. If I were to do it right now, the black completely eats all the rest of my stuff, and that's not what I want to do. Linear is good for my gradient type, but it's the opacity and the settings that I need to adjust. Okay, so current one is foreground to background. That's fine so long as my background color is set effectively to be 100% transparent, and that's what I'm going to do with mine. So I have clicked on the right hand little tab that shows up in this top part of the gradient. I'm going to make the opacity 0, and then it does not matter what that color is because you're having it fade out. So that is the approach that I want to take. I can also change my blending mode, but I want you to see how this looks initially. It's not going to look particularly different. I'm just getting a little bit of a hint of the black that's there. If you don't want any of that, there's one other trick to this, which is to pick whatever you want your shading color for both of the tabs. So I'm going to pick the color that I want to layer over this, and I'm going to pick sort of a medium purpley blue in my gradient, which I don't know if my gradient didn't update, but it's, I guess, reading the foreground background color there. I'm going to, oh no, it did. That's odd. Okay, so my gradient did update. I'm going to make sure that this guy, the right-hand side one, is the same color as the left-hand tab. So there's a reason for that. If they're both the same color, you won't particularly notice a difference as they transition, and that's what I was after. I still want to make this one 0% on the opacity, but by having it the same basic color that I'm using for the gradient, I reduce problems and that kind of thing. So I've got my essentially purple to transparent gradient. If I layer it over the corner, it looks like this. I'm going to do all 4 corners so that I get a darkened gradient, sort of a diamond-y shape forming towards the center. And this was with the blending mode of none, which is in Photoshop called normal. If I switch this blending mode to multiply, even using the same color, and I go back over those corners, it'll get darker. If I pick a different color and do that, it'll do even more interesting stuff. So play around with perhaps a couple of different items, especially if you're doing the blending mode, and when you're happy with it, you can call your background close enough. And I'm going to call this close enough, and I'm going to stop and restart the video with the rest of what we need to do to pull this together, because it actually does come together fairly quickly.